for those of you who don't know me, my name is Shannon Duong. I am a planner at the RDOS, and I am the file manager for the proposed rezoning that involves the property at 1313 Greyback Mountain Road. So before I really get into the meat of this presentation, I just wanted to go over what a public information meeting is. So first of all, it's informal in nature, so we don't take any formal minutes, but we do record these meetings just to have them for reference later. In particular, this meeting will be posted online for reference for anyone who wasn't able to attend the meeting tonight. So any comments that you actually want to have considered by the Regional District Board to review at their consideration of first and second reading should be submitted in writing. So this would be in the form of email. You can submit it to planning@rdos.bc.ca, or you can submit a feedback form either dropped off in person, mailed in, or again by email. Anything that's brought forward to us tonight verbally, we won't take forward to the board, so it has to be in writing. So the format of this meeting will go, so I'm just going to do a quick overview in terms of kind of the land use side of things, and then I'll pass it over to Andrew Reeder, who is our Senior Manager of Solid Waste, to kind of get more into just the technical aspects of the composting operation itself, and then we'll open it up to a public question and answer session. So like I said, we're both here to answer any questions that you may have, and if we're not able to address all your questions tonight, we can certainly follow up. So just a bit about the application status. This was initiated on July 6, 2023 by the Regional District Board, and I'll get into that a bit later. We sent out agency referrals to any affected or any organizations which may have their interests affected, such as the Agricultural Land Commission, affected municipal government, so that includes the City of Penticton, as well as the Village of Karamia, etc. And these were sent out on July 7th. Tonight, we're doing our public information meeting, and following this meeting, we will be bringing this application forward to the Electoral Area E Advisory Planning Commission for their review next Monday on August 14th. Following that time, we will bring the application forward to the Regional District Board for consideration of first and second reading of that associated amendment bylaw. And we're looking right now at September 7th for that date to be confirmed. And then if the board were to give first and second reading to the amendment bylaw, a public hearing would be scheduled. So as I mentioned, the location of this property is 1313 Greyback Mountain Road. It is directly east of the Campbell Mountain landfill currently. The official community plan designation that applies to the property is resource area, and similarly, the applicable zoning is resource area. The parcel is approximately 31.8 hectares in size, and the property is predominantly within the ALR, but not wholly. The southern portion of the property contains a modular home, as well as some old stock corrals and livestock fencing that was associated with a former ranching operation on the site. So just a bit of details about the previous board consideration. As some of you may know, an application was previously made to the Agricultural Land Commission to exclude 22.56 hectares of the property from the Agricultural Land Reserve. And this application was refused by the Commission in 2021. So as a result of the ALC's refusal, alternative options needed to be explored in order to develop a composting facility on this property. So on July 6, 2023, the Environment and Infrastructure Committee of the board had reviewed various options for the construction of a food and yard waste composting facility, and amongst other things, had resolved to move forward with the development of an aerated bunker treatment and processing facility. And this just shows the design that they had resolved to move forward with. So phase one of the proposed development would include a food and yard waste composting site outside of the Agricultural Land Reserve. And you can see the Agricultural Land Reserve outlined there in green. And phase two of the proposed development would include a biosolids composting facility within the ALR, as long as an associated non-farm use approval is granted by the Agricultural Land Commission. And I'll leave it to Andrew after my presentation to kind of get more into the details of that, as mentioned. So the rezoning also proposes to permit public works and maintenance yard, which would include any accessory buildings and structures, and that really just would provide a means of flexibility to utilize this site for other public work uses and storage in the future. So the Okanagan Valley zoning bylaw defines composting operation as the entire area, buildings, and equipment used for the biological decomposition of organic materials, substances, or objects under controlled circumstances. The current resource area zoning that applies to the property doesn't list composting operation or public works and maintenance yard as permitted uses. So that being said, the proposal seeks to amend the zoning of the property under the Okanagan Valley zoning bylaw from resource area to resource area site specific, with the site specific provision specifically to permit composting operation and public works and maintenance yard, including accessory buildings and structures as uses on this property. And aside from the rezoning, there would be other requirements that would need to be met in order to move forward with the development. One thing to note is that while the property does contain lands designated as environmentally sensitive development permit and watercourse development permit areas, the construction of public facilities and utility works are exempt from these requirements as per the Electoral Area E official community plan bylaw. And ultimately, composting facilities are subject to provincial level requirements under the Organic Matter Recycling Regulation, or OMRR. And again, I'll leave that to Andrew to kind of get more into during his presentation. And lastly, as mentioned before, the property is located within the Agricultural Land Reserve. Therefore, any uses within the ALR, which are not otherwise permitted under the ALR use regulation, would require authorizations from the Agricultural Land Commission. Now, the proposed siting of phase 1 of the composting facility is outside of the ALR, as I had previously shown. However, the second phase would be proposing the biosolids component out within the ALR, and that is subject to the ALC's approval of a non-farm use application. So with that, that's kind of just my broad overview here of the land use side of things. And I'll go ahead and pass it over now to Andrew Reeder to get into kind of the more technical aspects of the composting facility. So thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. So I'm going to share a presentation with you. I'll just try this right here, right now, see what I can do. Okay, I'm hoping everybody can see that, and I'll start the presentation. So Shannon, is that thumbs up you can read? Okay, got a thumbs up. All right, so what I was hoping to do is just give a brief overview of the scope of the project, talk about the actual attributes of the facility that we're proposing itself. Hopefully the intent here is there seems to be a lot of misinformation going out there, and hopefully I can clear some of that up. And really, this is the first part of a community engagement. So what we're actually looking at doing is a series of open houses. And with those open houses, you'd be able to meet us one-on-one and talk to experts about the project if you have specific concerns. And we'd also be having a series of presentations throughout that open house period. So more to come in terms of public engagement. And then the other piece, I'll give a link at the end of the presentation. And really, my hope here is that people will read some of the studies and some of the information that our experts have provided. I'm going to make a number of assertions, and those are all backed up by experts. And certainly, we would encourage you to read there, and this is our regional connections page. And if you do have questions that are specific, we will answer those in writing. And we post any of your questions as well as those answers on the regional connections page as a means for folks who might get the benefit of those answers and questions. We'll provide that to you. So all those things are coming. And this is really the first kick of the can in terms of our community engagement, and really ties to our zoning process. So project scope. So what we're looking at is 2 phases. So I think Shannon outlined that we were unsuccessful in obtaining permissions for the Agricultural Land Reserve. So this is what we're actually looking at doing, is moving forward with our food waste and yard waste composting. And that's part and integral to creating a food collection system. So we're looking at adding to our recycling, we're looking at adding food composting. And that's something that's throughout BC now, and we're lagging a little bit behind in this. And certainly the intent is to start off with phase one of the project outside of the ALR. Should we be successful on a non-farm use, then we would proceed with phase two, which would be to remove the composting that occurs at Campbell Mountain. Currently, this is the biosolids facility, and integrate that with the food waste. Just to give people some context, we have, I'm not sure if you can see my little arrow, but I'm hoping you can. So phase one of the project is the blue area that's shown here. The larger area that's within the ALR is the green, and the entire property is the red. So really where we're looking at actually construction is a small portion of the entire site. And that's where this is right here. So this is the actual conceptual drawings that were created by AECOM, and we do have that study for folks to look at if they want to see that. Aerated bunkers. So this is what the actual bunker system might look like itself. I'll just go back up for one moment. So all the buildings that we have, and these are the areas where the raw material would come in. So this is where it would be sorted, and then the active composting bunkers. Those areas are where we will have it enclosed, and then we have a series of biofilters that are attached to the building, and they scrub the air to make sure that the odors are taken care of and everything's in an enclosed facility. We do have some storage areas outside of that, but those are after it's actually been cured. So all phases of construction will have strict odor control. All the surfaces will be lined or hard and ensure that there's collection of any runoff. The idea here is that there will not be any leachate that is collected. And when phase two is completed, which is the biosolids, we'll actually be reducing a substantive amount of leachate that's already going in through our landfill. So this will actually be an enhancement on the current situation that we have. The other big benefit, I haven't put this on the presentation, but the previous feedlot actually did produce leachate, and that didn't meet the ministry standards. So this would actually be an overall benefit in terms of leachate reduction. In terms of traffic, the traffic that would actually go to the landfill is actually going to the landfill composting facility instead. And that actually would reduce lineups and some of the conflict that we might see on Reservoir Road. And then we are looking at 2 streams of compost. And by that, we mean one would be for landscaping standard, and that would be our biosolids compost. And that would only be once we get phase 2 running. Phase 1 will meet something called an OMRI standard, which is a organic composting standard. And then that can be used for any farms, any home, and is a very good product in terms of for the public and for the farming community. It'll be a lot lower in terms of costs. Our cost per unit right now are proposed to be $66 per ton, as opposed to $120 per ton, which is what it currently costs us to process regular refuse. It'll be a reduction in our greenhouse footprint, and this is the entire, this is from the Climate Action Plan from the City of Penticton. And so we will reduce our footprint by 14% of everybody within the region, which is substantive. It'll divert between 26% and 40% of the waste stream. So 40% of the waste stream that we have currently is what's estimated to be in our current waste stream. So we realistically think that we can divert that through, especially if we have a collection system similar to what we have for recycling, that would reduce it substantively. And then we will reduce our future management costs by extending the life of our landfill. And then also one of the benefits is that we currently ship our wastes up to, our wood chips up to Tokel in Armstrong, and obviously a fairly large cost to transport those wastes. In terms of public benefit, some of the other things to consider, I think there was concern about public access to Camel Mountain, and actually what we'll be doing by having, I guess, a public body own these lands, we'll be able to secure access to the public, not lose access. So that's a positive. We'll be providing an alternative to burning. So currently, when farmers need to get rid of their waste, they'll typically will burn. We take those wastes to the landfill for free, and by composting them, hopefully we improve air quality. Once phase 2 is complete, existing odors will be reduced by 70%. And our leachate that's currently being generated by the biosolids facility will actually be removed. Another benefit is it will actually improve water conservation. So compost actually acts as a sponge and helps to trap moisture in the soil as well as nutrients. One of the challenges that are coming down from the provinces, or sorry, from the federal government to the provinces, is a requirement, or I guess an ask, to look at reducing nitrogen chemical supplements to soils. And that would certainly help with that and help reduce the greenhouse gases that get generated by nitrous oxide. Benefits to the agricultural community. So it's a product that they can use as a soil amendment. It'll meet the organic certification standards that they might need to or want to meet. Again, it helps to trap moisture and nutrients in the soil. It's an alternative to burning. Most composting processes, and ours will be part of, I guess, will be part of that, is the temperatures in which the compost, I guess, is processed are very high. And what that does is it reduces or eliminates most seeds. So if you have manures or other soil additives, a lot of times you can spread noxious weeds, and the composting process destroys most of those. And it's also a safe way of disposing of blights and frost infestations. And currently, there's no way, the province wants you to bury these wastes, but we are prevented by the province to bury these wastes. It's only if we get special permissions that we can. So composting, you can compost them and cook them again at temperatures, and it's a safe way of disposing these infestations. Typically, we won't sell them afterwards. We would use it on top of the landfill as a final cover. And then the next steps was what we'll be looking at, a series of open houses, and we'll be advertising that on the radio, the paper, and also on our Regional Connection site. And we'll also be engaging people on Regional Connections, and certainly encourage people to visit the site, look at the studies, ask questions, give us your comments, and we'll give you answers. And then should we be successful in rezoning, we'll be looking at completing construction in 2025. And then what we're looking at doing as part of that is implementing a food collection system. So those two pieces go together. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if, Shannon, you've been looking at the chat. I see things popping up. But I wasn't sure if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, so I'm just going to do a quick kind of WebEx instruction just before we start taking some questions here. I do see that there was quite a few questions that were raised in the chat. I'm just going to open the floor to our verbal questions first, and then we'll circle back to the chat questions once I've had a chance to kind of go through them. So I'm just going to share my screen again, just for the benefit of the folks on the line or on the computer. So basically, we will take questions in turn. Just to indicate that you want to speak, this will differ based on whether you're participating by the computer or by phone. So if you're on your computer, just make sure to click the participants button at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. You'll need to hover your mouse over your name and then click the raise hand button. If you're participating by phone, you'll have to press *3 to raise your hand. And you will be unmuted when it's your turn to speak, and I'll let you know if that's the case. But once you're done, click the raise hand button or press star 3 to take your hand down, just so we make sure that we've accounted for all the outstanding questions. And if you come up with any questions after this meeting, or if you just didn't get to have your question answered during this meeting, please send us an email follow-up at planning@rdos.bc.ca, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So with that, we'll go ahead and open this up. I'm just taking a look here. So I have a hand up from Ryan. And Ryan, go ahead. I've unmuted you.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Hey, so I live in Electoral Area E, and I pass the facility regularly. And so I'm wondering, what are we going to do to mitigate in the new facility what's happening in the current facility, which is it not compost. It's an anaerobic pile of decomposing organic material, but this is the reason that we're seeing fires there, that we're smelling odors. It's because it's in anaerobic conditions and not being composted properly. So what assurances do we have that we're not going to move something very similar to an area across the road?
Sure. So the facility that we're proposing to build is aerobic. So it's again, it's called an aerated bunker system, and we will actually, the biggest challenge that I've seen, quite frankly, is that with the biosolids composting, they don't cook it properly. They don't do screening that's necessary. And it's often not fully composted. You get something that's sort of half there. And so our intent with this, there's two things. One is that, first of all, the product that we're going to be, first of all, moving isn't going to be the biosolids. The initial product that we're going to be moving is going to be our food compost. And our intent is to make that a very high quality, high end product, and also saleable to our farmers. So for those reasons, our full intent is to not be a giveaway necessarily, but low price, but at high-end quality, because it is not, the current materials right now are not high quality. So I hope that answers your question, but the type of facility that we are building is aerated, and our full intent is to spend the efforts to make sure that it is a quality product at the end.
Okay, so can you define for me high quality then?
Sure. So basically, the biggest parts to it is that it doesn't meet the nitrogen carbon ratios that are supposed to be typically with compost. It needs to be screened properly, so it means that things like plastics, paper, all that stuff is removed. The overs have to be out of it, so it needs to be a smaller size. It can't be large. I mean, it's got to be less than an inch. It's got to be like ½ inch is probably what you would have as your maximum size. And so that's typically what you do. And then you make sure that you are testing it. So what you typically do is a series of tests as you cook it, as you go along. And you confirm that, first of all, it's met all the biological standards that are required by OMAR. But also our intent is to meet something called OMRI, which is a material, this is an organic material standard. So it's a much higher one, and it cooks longer. It needs to have higher, I guess, testing levels and the number of tests. And that's certainly what we're intending to do. So all those quality control pieces will be there, as well as the actual product will be different.
Okay, so is there a reason they're not there at the current facility, and what type of biological tests are you doing? Because we're definitely looking for, biology is what would constitute a high quality compost,
Yeah.
right? It would be your ratio to bacteria to fungi, say the amount of nematodes or protozoa or these types of things. So is there, and I would love to know if you've hired a consultant or if there's somebody on board that, we could check the credentials of that's working on this product.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, we would test and publicize any of our testing results. I need to qualify. We don't run the facility at Campbell. So
Okay.
that's run by the city of Penticton at this point.
Mhm.
In our discussions with them, the intent once we is to move that facility up to a 1313 Greyback Road, uh, put in odor control that's very strict, and then control the leachate that would be possibly generated from that, and then create a higher quality product. The other thing that we can do with it, and I'm totally going to geek out on you, but one of the things that we're looking at as well is that products that don't meet our standards, we're looking at something called BioCover, and this is a synergy with our landfill. And what BioCover does is it helps break down the methane fugitive methanes that come out from our landfill, and turns that into carbon monoxide. It's used in other parts of the world. We'll be the first. We've got it actually approved by the province now to proceed with it. But basically, you use a compost product as your final cover, and that gets rid of that methane. So that's our outlet for materials that don't meet those standards, and we would certainly use it for those purposes. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, it's just like aerobic facilities, just like that tells me that there's air in the facility, you know, it doesn't tell me that there's air in the compost, right? That's a huge issue that's happening in most municipal waste facilities, is that they're not being properly turned, the temperatures aren't being properly checked, not all parts of the pile are getting hot enough for long enough. Like there
Yep.
should be no odors at all from an aerobic compost facility.
Yeah, and anyway, our intent is to do the things that you were saying. Typically you mix in with a bulking agent like wood chips, you pump air through it, you meet the temperature requirements. All those things are logged, and all that information is available to the public as well.
Well, and what can you share with us this OMRI standards, or even spell it out for me so it's something I can look into myself?
Sure. I could probably put it up on the screen for you.
That'd be great.
Let me just,
Can I ask one last thing? If you're aware of the work of Dr. Elaine Ingham, she's pretty much like the godmother of compost and all composting soil science from the University of Oregon.
no, I'm not. We worked with a number of consultants with this one. We worked with AECOM, and they're experts, and also a company called Tetra Tech. So OMRI stands for Organic Material Review Institute,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got a series of standards there. OMRI.org is the facility. If you want, I can put it up on the screen, but did you get that?
That works. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's my major concern. I mean, beyond the fact that
Yep.
there's elk and birds and everything in this beautiful area, I want to ensure that we're not just creating another pile of anaerobic waste.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And then we also have done some environmental reviews as well. So we actually have hired a RP Bio to look at the project to see if there's any measurable impacts. And his comment was no, there wasn't. And we'll post that up on our webpage. So if you want to see that study, you can. Or it's really just a letter report.
My experience lies in the background of compost, so I'd be interested in anything you guys have to share on how this facility, like the fact that the facility has odor eliminators in it concerns me, because it shouldn't have to be there with a proper operation. So I would love to see anything that you guys have about the facility and the people you've consulted with the facility, and if you could share any of those testings that will be used in the future, that would be great.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much for your questions, Ryan. So I will go ahead and move on to our next hand then, which was from Brad. And Brad, go ahead. I've unmuted you.
So in this, there's a report on the site, on the RDOS site, to the Environment and Infrastructure Committee. And it says that this project was previously rejected for Summerlin landfill and in Marin Valley. So due to concerns from the board or residents, So I was just wondering what were their concerns and how were they addressed at the Penticton site?
Sure. Some of the ones that, some of it was political, large parts of it were political. So the Summerlin site, for example, a large part of that was the traffic concerns. So they were concerned about adding new traffic. And what's different from this situation to ours is that what we're doing is diverting folks that would be otherwise going to our landfill to the composting facility. So currently we have garbage trucks coming in, and those might be going the yard waste instead of and food waste, instead of going into our landfill, they would go over to the composting facility. If we have right now, part of what we receive at our facility at Campbell, we receive yard waste in commercial quantities, so landscapers, things like that. Those folks would then be diverted over to the composting facility as opposed to going to the landfill. So we think that that would be a significant reduction in traffic going to through our scale, especially spring and fall are sort of our big hits. And so that's sort of a difference there. So Summerland, that seemed to be their chief concern, and they wanted, if we were to build it, we would have had to have built a number of road upgrades, which we just couldn't afford. So that was sort of the main issue there. I think with Marin Valley, it was the fact that it's a new facility that really wasn't there previously. That would be my take on that. I wasn't here with the regional district when that was reviewed, so I wasn't here when they to hear what the public had said, but that's sort of what I had gathered. What we're proposing that's different with this one, I guess, is that we're looking at an existing facility at the Camel Mountain, which is our composting facility, and hopefully making it better. So that's the big difference there.
Yeah, so it sounds like all the benefits are contingent on moving the Campbell Mountain part, right? Which would be phase 2. So what if phase 2 doesn't get approved?
No, good question. It's not all the benefits. I mean, the biggest benefits, there's right now we have, and these are more of the global benefits for the city of Penticton. So right now, we have all of our food waste that's going in with our regular municipal waste. And obviously that's causing a greenhouse gas problem. It costs more, and we aren't really doing anything positive with that waste. So what we're proposing to do is to build something positive with our food waste and yard waste, not to make something negative. I think the pieces in terms of I think we talked about leachate generation. So currently we have collection at the bottom of the landfill, and about 50% of the leachate that's being generated at our landfill currently, we estimate, is coming from that biosolids facility. By removing that and moving it with an impermeable surface and collecting that, and our intent is to reuse that surface water and to recirculate that over the compost. And it's not like landfill leachate, it's more organic based. So you have your bugs and your things that actually help break down are useful in breaking down compost. So that's the intent, and also to reduce water consumption. So the bigger benefit, obviously, in phase 1 is more geared, I think, towards the larger community. Phase 2 would certainly be more beneficial to the people in the local area, which is what I would see. But to make phase 2 work cost effectively, it would help to have that food compost phase one in place, because we'll be combining some of the infrastructure. So odor control, like some of the biofilters, things like that, those can all feed into it, the scales, and even some of the storage facilities. So all those things combined to make it more efficient. We're looking at about a $66 per ton cost for residents for food composting and yard composting alone. When we're able to get the biosolids, we're looking at taking that cost down to about $50 per ton.
So, sorry, just going back to what you said. So you said phase two is more feasible because it would be at the same site as phase one. So do you think it's then a risk to go ahead with phase one before phase two is approved?
No, because even if we don't build phase two, phase one is still a positive project for the community at large. We won't be able, without food composting and some ability to do that, we won't be able to do food waste collection at the curb. It has to go somewhere.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Brad. And up next, I have Gill.
Hey,
Gill,
Gil.
go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, hi. So it sounds like you guys have got a deal already worked out with the ALR. I don't understand how the
No,
no.
no, we will need to apply to do a non-farm use with the ALR, and that would be our intent. This is not an uncommon type of facility within the ALR. Like they've just approved one at Campbell River. They did one at Comox. They did one in Kelowna. They did one in Abbotsford. These aren't new, and so we're not quite sure why the ALC made the decision that they did. But we do see a pretty substantive benefit to the agricultural community, and we do actually have quite a few letters from the various agricultural organizations because they do see the need.
So the biosolids, if the ALR does not, or Land Commission does not approve that expansion or allow that use on ALR land, then what?
This would be a city of Penticton question. What are they going to do? I don't know. This is their facility. We've offered to take that over and to improve it significantly. So that's our intent. We would need to have, in order for us to accommodate that, we will need to have the ALC's approval.
Okay. So the biosolids, if it does move to Greyback Road, will the biosolids be done indoors as well?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And it'll be the total reduction. We've estimated, we've done a number of models with this. We Tetra Tech and then reviewed by AECOM. And we're pretty confident that we can reduce total existing odors by about 70%. So it'll have a pretty positive impact on the community at large.
So I missed that. You said you offered the city to take over the composting and they refused that, or
No.
no?
What I was saying is that it's owned by the city right now. So this is the composting facility at the landfill.
Yeah.
They operate, they own it. We've said, if we can help you by moving it to 1313 Greyback Road and build phase two of the works, we'd be happy to do that. And we'll capitalize that, we'll build it, and then recover our capital costs through tipping fees.
Okay.
And everything, it would be impermeable surfaces, and then also strict odor control both.
Okay. because that pond on the drawing that you showed is directly above a natural spring there.
Yeah. You want me to show you that again? So basically that right there, that pond that we were talking or showed,
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
be like a tank. And
Yeah.
so it'd be an impermeable tank. And the idea is that we would capture the leachate that might be created through the composting processes. And all that would be diverted to the tank and then pumped back up to the composting windrows or bunkers. And that would be added to, because you need a little bit of water to drive a composting process. And
Yeah.
so that's what we would be doing. So it would be put back onto that, and none of it would be going into the environment.
Okay. So there's a number of people that live up in the Spiller Road area, and their a big concern is that if the RDOS starts doing landfill type work in the ALR land, what's going to stop them from expanding the landfill across to the other side of Spiller Road, and then everyone up here gets to drive through the middle of a landfill? Because
Well,
the city-owned property between Spiller Road
Yeah.
and Greyback Road is in the ALR as well.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I mean, you couldn't stop it at this point to do that because the landfill actually supersedes or predates the ALR. But we do have a fill plan. We do stick to it. It's over right now. We're looking at over 100 years in terms of our fill plan. So, I'm hoping that within 100 years we won't have landfills. I mean, quite honestly, as a solution, it's not a great one, but that's what we have. And until we come up with something better, that's what we're stuck with. But yeah, no, we're not planning on expanding the landfill. And I think if you were looking at in terms of safeguards, so because that's what I'm hearing you say, by making it a non-farm use, you're actually not taking it out of the ALR. What we're actually doing is saying here's a specific use that you can use that land for. It doesn't include landfills. So it might say we're going to have a compost facility of a certain size, and that's all we're allowed to build. And that's what I would expect.
Yeah, I understand. It's just governments have a bad track record when it comes to starting something and then growing it.
Yeah, fair
Right.
enough.
So that's a concern, and the regional district is not helping development in the area.
Yeah, the big thing with it I see that may give you, like I say, a bit of cold comfort with it is that because it is a non-farm use, we wouldn't be able to expand. It would be limited to what the ALR says. So, and that's an outside third-party body that we just don't control. So it's not something that we could supersede or do something different than.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Gill.
Thank-
So up next we have Liz. Liz, go ahead. I've unmuted you.
And I just want to be clear, Andrew, you're saying that RDOS is going to take it over. Is that regardless of if approval isn't reached from the ALR for phase 2? Are you still going to take over phase 1?
Okay, I want to make sure I get your question correct. Are you asking, are we going to take over the biosolids facility from the city, or are you asking, are we going ahead with phase 1?
Regardless, like you're saying that RDOS is going to take over the composting facility from the city. The city runs the composting facility right now, right?
Okay. Yeah, got it. So,
So regardless of how the ruling goes, is RDOS still willing to do both, to do it if you don't get?
well,
the ruling?
No, not necessarily, because
Okay.
what we need to know from the city is, I mean, they would have to say this is something that they wanted. Currently, it's in their possession. They own it, they run it. There's a weird license lease agreement that we have actually with the city of Penticton, but it's currently theirs. So unless they were to ask us to do that, the understanding is that if we build a new facility for them, then we would take ownership and charge them tipping fees for the recovery. That the reason why we would be looking at that is that there's economies of scale in terms of operating both. The capital operating both, you can use some of the same equipment, you can use some of the same operators, you can use in terms of testing. There's a lot of synergies by combining them both. But that would be contingent upon the ALC saying, yeah, that we could do a non-farm use.
Okay.
Did I answer your question properly, or
Yes,
did I?
yes, it does. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay.
The second, and I guess it's more of a comment than anything, I am incredibly skeptical because I am a property owner on Narramatta Road, and we have been living with this bench stench since 1995. And we have been bounced around between RDOS, city, getting us to come up and smell the compost on and on and on and on, and there's no resolution. And in fact, at one point I was told that it's the way my property sits and the draw of the land and all this other, quite frankly, BS, because since then I have discovered all of my neighbors are dealing with the same thing. People that live down where the cemetery is have this bench stench. And, you know, it's not just a lovely little compost odor, it is fecal. And we can't be outside on our property when the sun goes down. And so I am very dubious about a facility that is going to, as you say, reduce the odors. Like in your one slide, you say once phase 2 is completed, the existing odors will be reduced by 70%. Is that what you are referring to?
Yes.
Bench stench.
So the primary odors that are coming from our landfill currently are coming from our biosolids facility, or not ours, the city of Penticton's. And we believe, and this is through odor modeling and other facilities that have been built, and I can point you to ones that have been constructed that do have odor control. You know, and if you are going, say, for example, to Abbotsford or through, you know, I could show you where they are and you could see for yourself. I mean, I think odor is one of those things where the proof of the pudding's in the eating. I hate to use that phrase, but that's the truth of it. But, you know, the experts that we've hired that's what they're saying. And we've done odor modeling, and we believe that that is what would be the significant benefit from that. Yeah.
The odor. Okay, well, I'll leave it there, but I would really appreciate that information because I certainly am happy to explore that. And I have to say I appreciate Ryan's comments, because I think those of us that live here on the bench, we are very concerned about our property values and just our quality of life. Okay, I don't want to hold up the call.
Yeah, and what we'll do as well, I think there was, and I'll see if I'll make sure it's on the Regional Connection site for you. But there is some stuff on odor modeling, and it shows some of the mapping. And one of the real benefits that I saw with it was any of the intense odors are really just on site. Anything that goes off site is very light. Whereas when you look at the modeling of the existing facility, it does reach quite wide. But I think probably the best thing to do is just look at the pictures. They kind of say it all. And if you have questions with that, you can always give me a shout back or, call me. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Okay. I've got just a couple of other things here, so I'll try to sort of move us along. Okay. As a farmer myself, I'm very concerned about ALR regulations, land coming out of ALC, all of that. And you mentioned that you have numerous letters from agricultural organizations, I quote you, in
Yep.
support. Can you please also supply that information?
It should be there already. We put
okay.
that in, we put that on the Regional Connections page. And there's like the Great BC Grape Growers, there's the Tree Fruit Growers. These are sort of the organizations, and so all that's available for you. And some of the things, just sort of giving examples of recent issues that we've dealt with. I think last week I had Canadian Food Inspection Agency. A grower wanted to bring up, and this is Oliver, so it's not related here. They wanted to destroy 1,900 plants because they weren't certified to have snails removed. There's a snail thing. I don't know what it's about. Anyway, so if we had the composting, we were just in the process of putting in our composting facility down in Oliver right now. And if we had the blowers installed, we could have composted, and we couldn't. And so we had to go through a big fight with the Ministry of Environment so we could actually bury them in our landfill. And typically we wouldn't have to do that. We could just compost it and it'd be done.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then is this project in any way tied into the bid from Canadian Horizons to develop on Naramata Road? Because I know when they had their public forums, that was one of the promises they were making.
No, not tied into it at all.
Done. Okay. Thank you very much for answering my questions, and I look forward to sort of keeping up on this, because it's something near and dear to my heart that this is done properly.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. So I see that there were a number of questions that were asked in the chat by Ryan. Ryan, we do have a little bit more time now if you want another opportunity to maybe just like speak to some of those questions that you asked. Okay, I will go ahead and unmute you. And go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I didn't know that there were other facilities like this already in operation.
Yep.
Okay, and so
we've got, just so you're aware, the facilities that are, we've got two in operation and two just about to come online. So Summerland is about to come online, and Oliver is about to come online, and then there's one called it's a private facility out by past Princeton, and there's another one out by Eastgate, which is up by the Manning border of Manning Park.
okay, and you said part of these, that's awesome. So part of these, you said part of the operation is testing in these facilities, as somebody who's looking at this stuff, ideally under a microscope and looking at the biology of it. So is there a place where we can look at some of the testing from the other facilities?
I don't have my facility in Oliver done yet. It hasn't been, like I say, it's in the process of getting built. Like I just got to get the blowers installed. That's it. The one in Summerland, so I don't have anything for you there. Summerland is just in its final stages. You would need to contact the Ministry of Environment to talk about Arrow, because I don't have any control. They don't report to me. That's Arrow is the company name, and it's just outside of Princeton. I can provide you information about that if you like, about where it is and who operates it. And then there's a company called Net Zero Waste, which is just outside of Princeton, or sorry, Manning Park, which has a composting facility there, and they also do testing.
Okay, so has somebody looked at the testing? Like somebody on your board looked at the testing from these other facilities in order to approve this facility? Like, is there Like
No,
somebody must have seen
it's
results from somebody in order to move
no,
forward with this planning.
we don't. Yeah, we don't regulate. We're not their regulators.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
we
just
don't.
meant for like quality, like you're saying we're going to produce this great quality product, right? Which is wonderful for this agricultural land. So I'm wondering if you've looked at any of the end results to know that what they're
Yeah.
producing is a great product. Is a
I,
quality.
I used to work for a city Kelowna, not too long ago, well, 5 years ago. So maybe a while back. Um, yeah, I used to deal with the composting there and the landfill there as well. So yeah, the Ogogo product and Glengrow products. Very familiar about how that is set up, and I could probably get examples, call them up and say, here's what they look like. They don't go to an OMRI standard. They go just so their testing regime wouldn't be quite as big as what we're proposing. I don't think we would do an OMRI standard for, just so you're aware, I wouldn't do an OMRI standard for the biosolids product. I would do that for the food composting. And the simple reason is that I can't meet an organic standard with biosolids. It just won't, it doesn't meet that overall piece. So for me to market it as a fully organic product, I have to meet the OMRI piece. And I wouldn't be able to do that with, I would need to meet the OMAR standard for the biosolids. I wouldn't be able to do that with the food waste. So I need to go for a step further with food waste.
Yeah, I think it'd be great if you guys could share with the public some of the biological testings that's been done at the other facilities, just so we know that we are producing, because that's really the only way is to look at it under a microscope. There's no other way to know that we're actually producing something beneficial for the soil, right?
Yeah.
And so the other thing you keep saying is food waste, and so I know that's obviously components. So where are the other components for the compost being sourced?
Sure. So yard waste and food waste would be the pieces. We would be, those would be the two things we mixed, and we might mix in a bit of wood chips with that, but mostly be yard and food would be together. So
Yeah. So
what we're proposing to do, and I'm totally going off track, when we're looking at food composting, probably what we would do is combine the food and yard waste in one container, and then bring that back to the new facility being proposed, and then compost that product.
yeah, I really want to see these experts you're speaking with, because
Sure.
proper compost can't be made with just greens. Like there
No, it has to
requires,
have.
you have to have carbon, right? You have to have 60% carbon, which is wood chips, 30% greens, which is food waste or
Yep.
yard waste, any type of green waste. And then you need 10% nitrogen. So
You
there
got to
needs
have
to be
your
that balance.
you got to have your carbon nitrogen balance. Absolutely.
So you're just feeding bacteria, like food waste and yard waste is just bacteria feeders. And that's fine. You can have a lot of bacteria, but you also need fungal feeders to have a proper, this is what's causing smell. Because if you have too much bacterial feeders, they're eating oxygen too fast. It's causing an anaerobic condition. This is what causes smell in compost facilities. This is why you have to put these odor protections on your facilities, which wouldn't need to be there if a proper recipe and system was used with composting. So this is where I'm having major concerns. It doesn't sound like I would love to see the experts that are brought in on this, because this
Sure.
doesn't even sound like a recipe for compost to me.
You can talk certainly. The main I guess group that we've chatted with would be AECOM and Earth Tech, or sorry, Tetra Tech. So those are the two consultants that we've used to help put the two programs together.
And are you going to provide kind of links or people that we should contact
Yeah,
there?
you
Are they
can-
going to be
I can provide
maybe
you
at
both.
some of these meetings that you guys are going to have in the future?
We can. I mean, I think our biggest thing would be to put the studies up onto our regional connection sites, and if they're not adequate for you, we can always augment those too. So I mean, all the studies that we have are public information, and we're happy to share it.
Yeah. Do you understand the concern I'm having here, though, Andrew? Because there is
Yeah, not
very
really.
few
Honestly,
municipal waste facilities that are proper, that are run under
I'll-
proper
I'll-
biocomplete compost.
I'll be blunt.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get sort of derail things, but I mean, ran the Glengrow program, which is yard waste.
Mhm.
No problem. Glengrow is an awesome product that Kelowna grows. It's a non-issue, and it's all yard waste. The materials that are biosolids, which is called OgoGrow, not so much. That's one where we've had to bring in wood chips, and what we actually did there was we brought in hog fuel. We did I don't want to get into the details, but we actually exchanged some of the hog fuel, so we got a better nitrogen ratio. And similar to what you're talking about for those reasons. But the problem with the OGRO system, it didn't have strict odor control. And what we want to make sure that we do with this, which is important, is that we do have strict odor control for all the buildings, because to me that was the biggest failing that we had in Kelowna with our OGRO system. We didn't have any problems with Glengrow. It didn't really smell that much, like you were saying, where the challenges were more the biosolids.
Yeah, like there's a amazing compost facility in Chilliwack. I think his name is Tetra Organics. He runs a huge compost facility. You could stand across the road and never know that there's compost happening there, because he's using a proper recipe of compost. So I do want to look at these experts and see what, like that. I'm not saying I know everything, but I have studied this. I have a microscope sitting next to me. I would love to look at some of the product that you've produced, this Glengrow. Maybe we can put it under a microscope and look at what's being produced out of these facilities. That would be great.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, so we're just past 8 o'clock here. I know Liz has had her hand up for a little bit here, so I will just, if you've got a quick question, we'll go ahead and move to that, and then probably close the meeting. And any unanswered questions, as I mentioned before, could be directed to our email, planning@rdos.bc.ca. And as I mentioned in the chat, any technical questions, I'll go ahead and forward to Andrew for a response. But it just kind of ensures that everything's funneled, and we just make sure that we're all kind of looped in here. All right, Liz, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, I forgot to ask one other question, and I actually, while I had a break, I went and got my file so that I could give you the correct information, because you're mentioning the importance of wood chips and how this is going to decrease the farmers having to burn. Is that correct?
Well, more what we take, so we take, it's more like prunings that we receive from the farmers, and a lot of that gets chipped out, and parts of it gets shipped out to Tokal and we spend about, just to give you an idea, the magnitude, we spend about 800 grand a year in shipping. So that's kind of, and then we have to ship that. That's just shipping. And then there's the shipping costs that we have to pay to send it all the way out to a cogen burner in Armstrong, and
Yeah,
it's
well,
and
yes.
it's very expensive.
Yes, and I guess my point is, I contacted RDOS in, I've got the date here, March 2021. And I was hoping to be part of the chipping program that RDOS in the past had been part of. I took out 1.5 acres of apples. And I was told at that time that that program was, they have, has no more funding available. And I guess I'm just putting a plug in for the farmers that if you want us to stop burning, there's got to be something that is financially makes sense for us, because for me to have what was it, South Okanagan Tree Works come in for 1.5 acres, do you know what I was going to be charged for chipping?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Well, just guess.
No, I don't know.
$12,000. So I'm just thinking about your cost analysis of what you guys are paying when the farmers bring up the prunings and you have to ship them and everything else, right?
Yeah, so I mean, we provide a zero tipping fee for farmers to take their prunings to the landfill now. So that is a subsidy, and we do that because we are hoping that they won't burn. When
Yeah.
we've looked at the tipping program, to be honest with you, we weren't getting huge uptake. It was only partially subsidized, and we weren't getting a huge uptake by folks anymore. Mostly where we were seeing the chipping occurs, the conversion from fruit trees to wine, and we weren't seeing a huge uptake in that. So we said, well, this program really doesn't make a lot of sense, and the board elected to eliminate that. we still do have free, I guess, no tipping fee for farmers. We do charge for landscapers. That is available to the farming community. And our hope is that, especially when there's fire bans in place, that at least there's an alternative for them, because right now there is none.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for taking my question. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Liz. All right, so I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the evening. I do see one outstanding question from Ryan, asking to put links on to the expert consultants used on the projects. I believe that's something we could potentially do through Regional Connection. So
Yeah,
yeah,
use that.
Great. So with that, thank you everyone for coming out. We've got some great questions tonight, and feel free to reach out if you have any others. Yeah, other than that, have a great night, everyone.